Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, the show that offers you tips and strategies to help speakers build the business of their dreams. Now here's your host, 30-year industry veteran and business coach, Jane Atkinson.
Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I am joined today by Jen McDonough, the leader of the Wealthy Speaker School. Welcome, Jen. I'm so happy to have you here.
Jane, it's always a hoot getting to spend time with my favorite Jane.
We have a lot of fun together, and today we're going to talk about what I think is really important to our listeners, which is booking more business in 2025. Now, truth be told, this is no secret. Output equals input. What do I mean by that? The more seeds you plant, the more outreach you do, the more you will see a harvest. This is just a straight up numbers game. And whenever I have clients saying this isn't working, we always go straight to, okay, tell me a little bit about your numbers. You know, all of
And they're
my
like, what numbers? Like,
yeah, what are you talking about? I haven't been, I've been working on this over here. All of the speaking superstars that have come through working with us, unless they went viral immediately, which is very, very hard to do and rare, they started with a concerted outbound effort. We've talked before about Ryan Estes and Kendra Hall. Ryan, concerted outbound effort. He was on the phone in his kitchen, smiling and dialing right from day one. Kendra Hall decided she was going to send chunks of 300 emails at a time. She'd get the results from the 300, go and deliver all the keynotes, and then come back and do it again to keep her calendar full. Jen, I want to talk to you about your own business. Recently, you've changed your output a little bit just because you've had like a bit of a change of circumstance and you're focused on some other businesses and our school. Thank you very much for sticking with us. But when you were deep into it, first tell us what was your focus in terms of who was your target? And secondly, what were some of the things that you did at the beginning that helped you gain traction?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I wanted to do was throw spaghetti at the wall. Like, I don't know who's going to hire me, so I'm just going to throw it out there. But also,
Right.
when I started working with the Wealthy Speaker School, Jane, you may remember my time was very limited.
Yes.
So I was working in the corporate world, my soul-sucking job. And at that time, I had 2 weeks vacation. And so for me to travel across the country would have been burning up time. I would have had 2 days of travel, 1 day of speaking, 3 days. That would have been 3 into 10. I would have had 3 speaking gigs a year that I could afford time-wise to go to. And so
Right.
what I did at that time was I started searching by location. And honestly, it was a great chance for me to test different groups out because I wasn't quite sure and I was figuring this out. And I eventually landed on first responders for me. And I had come from the medical world. And what I liked about the medical world is so many things. And when I started to think of in terms of template, and we talk about that in the school, is templating your audience. I could see the similarities on first responders, medicals. Oh, okay, I got it. This is my kind of my avatar, and it went from there. And so that was the first part is the specialty. And I think you had asked about the outbound efforts.
Yeah, so you went from kind of broad, I'm going to speak to all audiences in, let's say, Minnesota, and then you went more narrow and you decided first responders, probably because you had some success with some first responder type groups and type audiences. How did you get those first, half a dozen engagements? What kind of numbers were you able to put down when you had a full-time job?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. Like most speakers who come into our school, Gene, that are struggling, they're not getting booked enough, they're not getting the fees they want. Sometimes in this world that we live in, some of us put out the website, we put out our social media, and we're like, ta-da, I'm here, like book me. And it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So that was a you know, mindset type thing that I had to kind of get over. And so with the limited time and with how my personality is, I chose with my superpower to go with email. So I couldn't, for me, that time, that season of life where I was working full time and such and had other commitments, picking up
Yeah.
the phone would have been really tough. And so emailing worked really well. I could schedule it. They could respond back to me. I could respond back in my little soul sucking job, on my lunch hour, do responses back or phone calls. And so it allowed me to control that time a little bit.
So how many do you think at the first, when you were so very limited on your time, like 10 emails a week, 20,
Yeah,
30? Can you remember? I mean, I know that was over a decade ago, so
yeah,
I'm
that's
pulling.
yeah,
I'm
Jean. I'm like, what did I have for breakfast this morning?
yeah,
So
I know. Me too.
I'm pulling back. So, I want to touch on one issue that I had, and again,
Yes.
we see this over and over and over again. You send out that one email, like you get so geared up. It's like, I found a contact. I found a contact, and I'm gonna reach out to them. And you reach out, and guess what? It's crickets. And so
Right.
that was another mindset thing that I had to get over. Like, oh, this isn't oftentimes a
Going to take
done.
more than one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, and so that was a learning experience. So as I would find groups, I would email them, and then it got to be like, oh, I need to email them again. Oh, I need to call them, or there needs to be some consistent. So that was a learning process. But I would say I would have my when I was doing local events, I was started to work with a VA overseas, and I would have them help me pull some local events. Like, it was really hard to invest that money. It was, but that was one of the first things besides the school that I invested in, was having
Search.
help on that. Yeah, and I did some of that too. But researching was one, and as I was get those, I would email them, and then after that, Jean, as say I found the first responder market, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this market. Then I would go look at the associations and go, oh, you know what? There's an association in this state. Guess what? There's probably 49 other states that have this association. And so I would do that testing. I would have my VA or myself, I would go pull, 3 or 4 names from places that I was willing to travel to. So where could I drive to in that case? Because
Right.
I'm working, like, where can I go drive early in the morning, speak? And so I set a radius up of, 6 to 8 hours that I'd be willing to drive. And then I started pulling those names. So for instance, I would go here in Minnesota, I would say, oh, Iowa, the Dakotas, Wisconsin, and Illinois and Minnesota. And I would go pull those associations, and I would test it. And if I found out that it was a good group, then I would pull the whole 50 list, and then I would start marketing to them. So I would start with probably, I would say, 5 emails a day was a
Okay.
realistic type thing. And then I would do that all week. And then, it was the follow-up that I had to learn that took a lot of
I
time.
love that. I love that. And you went full time, then your numbers dramatically increase. So let's say, what did you say, 5 a day? Probably tripled or something like that, so that your numbers started really, really cooking, because Jen, you did go from 0 to 6 figures relatively quickly once you were able to focus more time and energy into it, didn't you?
Right. It was, it's just like everybody, it took a little bit to do the foundational work that we talk about in the school. And that's not always that's not, most of us want to be on that stage speaking. And so doing the groundwork first, the Ready Aim launch, was really important. But once I had that down, then just getting into a groove and I feel it now looking back, it went fast. At the time, it felt like it was taking forever.
Slow. Well, David Atkins, one of my clients, one of my private coaching clients, he kept coming back to me saying, this isn't happening fast enough. And I had said to him from the jump, it was going to take 3 years. And he was really determined for it to be less. But I think I interviewed him last on the Wealthy Speaker podcast. Um, he said it really did take that amount of time. It takes about 3 years to start a speaking business. So if you're in year 4 and you're not seeing traction, you've got to look at your numbers. You've got to investigate. If you're in year 10 and you're not seeing the amount of speaking that you would like, you have got to investigate your outbound efforts. If you want to, by the way, check out that David Atkins podcast, go to speakerlauncher.com, and on the podcast page, there's a search button. You can search David and you'll see Launching Your Business with Focus Hustle. He maps out how he did it step by step. Now, let's brag on our mastermind students here for a second while my dog barks in the background. Let's brag on some of our mastermind students, because we have seen Rebecca and Tom and Mark and Jennifer. We've seen them all just kind of get out there and, they did the follow through, they did the connection, and we're going to talk about all the different types of selling superpowers that they all did different things. We saw them commit to a number though, and kind of follow through on that. Would you agree? Like, what was that kind of the secret sauce that was the thing that they all did the same?
Yeah, I would say so, Jane. We can talk about this here in a little bit, but we just did a mastermind here recently with one of our former mastermind students, Marin. And what is cool about this, that out of all the speakers that we've had come through the school, like there hasn't been one that I can recall that has been perfect. Like, for example, there's always been seasons of something that have come up, that excuses that could have been easy for folks to put aside. I'm going to use Marin as an example. She takes 3 months off every year and goes to this remote island. Like, that's a part of her lifestyle. But she just is got a huge
I love that.
association event that she's speaking to next week that she's really excited about. She also plays bass guitar. She's doing different things.
Yes.
But the thing that is the common thing that we see people who are successful at building that business is that consistent and persistent action and the willingness to invest, invest in the process, invest in the program, and just keep it simple. Keep it simple.
And here's something else, if it doesn't work, what you have been doing, try something else. If your email is getting crickets across the board, you got to change your email. If you're not getting any results or any action on, say, social media, you got to change it up and do something different.
Gene, I'm laughing because there's the other flip side of that. We had one of our mastermind members that I just adore the heck out of. He said, this isn't working. And I'm like, okay, one of my first questions when someone says this is, okay, let's look at your numbers. How long have you been doing it? He had been doing, I want to say like 50 emails a day for 5 days. And he had also been calling every day. And so he was calling every day, and it was like, whoa, I think you're the first member that I've ever said this
overboard.
Tone it down. Yeah, tone it down just a little.
Now, maybe his topic was tenacity, and that might have
sales.
Yeah. But for the most part, people do not want to hear about you every day. So I'm glad you brought that up, Jen. Yeah. We want to make sure that we're doing our outbound in a way that doesn't feel creepy, in a way that doesn't feel stalker-like. We want to do it in a way that keeps us top of mind. And timing really, it does become something. And that's the type of thing I think that comes up in your one-on-one coaching calls, Jen. I want to brag on you here for a bit, because one of the massive benefits that we have and I'm doing a straight up plug for our mastermind here, because we have private coaching with Jen as a part of it. People get time with their coach, and their coach can say things like, oh, wait. That is going to be a bit of a challenge for you. We need to change, and having somebody at your side who can save you time and money and aggravation can be so, so, so beneficial. We call Jen our secret weapon. And I do want to encourage you all. This is my call to action, like in the middle instead of waiting till the end. Hop on wealthyspeakerschool.com and scroll down the page to book a call with us, because we really do want to check it out and make sure it's a fit for you as well. And Jen, being that kind of one-on-one coach for you, can be such a game changer. And we have seen it time and time again. Now, another thing that is a total game changer is our accountability, holding your feet to your fire with your goals. Now, maybe some of you already have that kind of built in. You have a friend that you commune with, whatever it might be. Here's what's important about it. Jen, when we meet, we always start with wins on those calls, because part of our school's reading has been The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan. And what we've learned through that is that if you are measuring where you are today out towards your goal, you are constantly feeling less than and living in the gap. Whereas if you turn around and look backwards from where you've come, you are now measuring and living in the gain, because you're talking about your wins. And at the beginning of all of our accountability calls, we start with wins. How effective is that for the masterminders, Jen, to show up on these calls twice a month and report those wins right out of the top?
It's huge. I'm getting coaching. I think in order to be a good coach, like I want a coach that has a coach. And so one of my coaches said to me, is one of the benefits, and we talk a lot about the gap and the gain, is if you solely focus on outcomes, that is really hard, because that's like one outcome. Like you solely focus on getting that book, that event is going to come and go. But when you focus on the things that you can do, like I'm going to make 5 phone calls a day or 5 emails a day, like that's the thing. You have so many chances to celebrate those wins, and you're going to have a lot more losses if you only focus on the outcomes. And when you focus on those small wins, you're celebrating, and it's a hills and valley business. It's easy to get.
It really is. And sometimes a win is talking to a decision maker and making a connection with them and writing in your database something meaningful that you learned about them, so that the next time you call them, you are asking, oh, how's your dog Jackson? One of my clients, one of our members of our school, Frank, he always asks me, because he has right in his database, in his CRM, which is something we really encourage people to have. He has a customized field that says, what are the interesting things you know about this person? And he knows that my dog Jackson is 7 years old, and how's Jack doing, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that is a win when you are able to pick up a call and it's warm the next time, and you're able to move that relationship forward. Building relationships each time is a win. Now, one of the things I want to ask our listeners about is, what are the tools you are using to keep yourself on track? Jen, I was poking around inside our worksheet section of the school today. There were so many cool tools in there that I thought, I wonder if Jen and her team and her mastermind are using these. There was an income tracker tool. Of course, we have sample template emails so that they can start from there and generate their own voice. We provide speaking agreements. We help them narrow their target market. Like we have a tool called Topics That Pay in Speaking. We have a 90-day acceleration roadmap, which is so very helpful. So listener, what tools are you using that will allow you to track your results? Jen, you in the mastermind use the sales sprint, and I want to break down some things that we have on the sales sprint form. Are people using it and are they finding it helpful?
Yeah, just on our mastermind, we were talking about numbers this last week, and I'm like, hey, in with our groups, guys, our mastermind groups, we have people rotating through, that have been in there for a year, 2 years, or whatever. And so then we have people joining. And so, we don't have hundreds of people on the call. Like we meet a lot, we're together a lot. And so, some people make all the calls, some people pick and choose what calls. And so there's lots of time for us to connect and do like answer questions and really get down to the heart of things and where people are at. And that's another thing that is nice. You get to learn their business. So, like most of the people in there have given me permission to say, what really is, which is nice. Cause like sometimes I'm like, stop doing that. Like just stop right there. And, or, but one of the calls that we had last week, and we had, I think, 2 people on the call, which is unusual, but it was nice because we really dived deep into the thing. And we were talking about numbers, and one of them held up the sprint sales thing.
Yes.
Got my numbers for the week.
Got my numbers. So
Yeah.
let's talk about what some of the things, here are the steps. First, we decide what is your selling superpower. Jen said that email was going to have to be her selling superpower because she didn't have any other choice. Some people are really good at picking up the phone. Frank Soma, he's a sales guy. He loves to pick up the phone. That's his jam. And so he will do that all day long, and he will have his numbers listed out on his form, and he will commit to it. So number one, we could email, we could make phone calls, we could be really good at sending out videos so that people can get to hear our voice and see our face. We could be excellent at walking into a networking meeting of
To
100
Lisa,
people.
I think of her every time we
so good at that. Walk into a meeting with 100 people and walk out with 2 or 3 leads that
me, I'd rather be peeling off my toenails than being at a network.
Yeah.
Like you're not catching me there, but
Yeah.
but
That's
Lisa,
not, and so what we say is, okay, decide what, some people are really, really good at social media, and that is how they sell. Totally good. Choose what your superpower is going to be and then commit to it. If it's networking, for instance, maybe you decide that you're going to get out to 2 or 3 networking things each month. Maybe you decide that you're going to do one weekly. Maybe you decide you can do 2 a month. Whatever your number is, decide how often you're going to do it. And then the third thing is going to be commit to that. Being committed, if it's 50 emails a week, we want to create numbers that are going to get us some early wins. Okay, so don't choose 400 emails a week when you know it's going to be really, really hard to eke that out. Work your way towards 400. Maybe you start with 400 a month and get some wins under your belt for a month, and then you up it from there. We want to put it on our calendar. Jen, talk about time blocking for a second.
yeah, big time. It's so easy to put excuses in our pathway when it comes to this stuff. And guys, there is so many shiny objects out there. Like we can be chasing it all. And if
Your laundry could be a shiny object that takes you away
right,
from your goal.
and some of us have that FOMO, fear of missing out. But
Mhm.
having that time blocking, and for those of you that may have limited time, not a lot of people have, unlimited time. A lot of us have very finite time. So if you are, I'm speaking specifically for those of you that have commitments, maybe you have JLB that you're at, or you have a family, there's ways that you can do this. In my own instance, I was working my soul sucking job. We were paying off over $212,000 worth of debt. So we had extra jobs besides our full-time jobs. We had a 2-hour round trip commute. We were raising 4 little kids at the time, and I was building this business on the side. But guess what? For mine, it worked with a 10-hour block of time. I would get up at 4 in the morning. I would do my emails. I would do my work, and then I would leave for work at 6 a.m. with our 4 little kids. And then on Saturdays, and I didn't feel like that was taking away from my family, that 4 to 6.
Mhm.
On the weekends, I would sleep until 5. I would work it from 5 to 10 a.m. So the family was, didn't have me maybe for those 2 or 3 hours, but then I had the rest of the things. So it was working this business around the lifestyle that we had and around the time that we had. But here's the beautiful thing. When we're working with folks that come into the school that have that really limited time, one of the things I tell them is be grateful. Sometimes when you have that limited time, what that does is it forces you to be very focused. And
Be
sometimes that people who have lots of other things going on tend to be even more successful than people that have this unlimited time, that are chasing shiny objects all over the place, and they're not doing the work that gets them the best ROI for their time, money, and energy. And so it's a good
Getting
thing.
on the phone could equal rejection. Who wouldn't avoid rejection? That's really what it comes down to, is you're staying safe. If I go and do this website work, or if I work on a story of my speech and do something else, that's the shiny objects that Jen's talking about. So we're going to decide what our selling superpower is, number one. We're going to decide how often we're going to do it. We're going to put it on our calendar. And this is the most important thing. We're going to keep our commitment to ourselves. And I think as number 5, I'm going to say start with numbers that are achievable, because we don't want to set ourselves up for failures. We want to be able to record some wins, no matter how small. There's really only 2 things required to have success in this business. Number 1 is an all-in mindset and mentality, and number 2 is consistent action. That's it. That's it. If you're doing those 2 things. So let's say your consistent action that you took didn't get you the results. Either you're going to double down and do more, or you're going to change it and do better.
And
Okay.
I will say the most successful people that we've seen through are the people who show up for the calls. Like, even if you
Yes.
can only come on the calls for 5 minutes, there's something about that accountability and being around people who are doing it and they're on the same path. It's pretty magical.
Now, maybe you have your accountability in place and you don't need any help, but if you do need any help, we actually have 3 ways for you to join us. If you go to wealthyspeakerschool.com, you can see we have a DIY option, we have a course plus community option, and then we have the most effective thing that I can say we've ever offered, which is our mastermind. And like Jen said, sometimes you're on the call with 2, 3, 4 people. Sometimes there might be 10, but there's not going to be 100 people, and you're going to be able to get your questions answered. Jen, as we wrap up, I want to say thank you so much for being with me. You've been with me for over a decade. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you for giving our students all of the gold and helping them. Jen is the most amazing cheerleader, and being able to feel that energy. And sometimes somebody might come on the call a little bit down, and she will prop them up and send them back out feeling completely different with a mindset shift. Sometimes, she sees them a couple of times a week and just helps that momentum continue past their obstacles. They've told me over and over again, Jen, that your input is invaluable. So thank you for all that you bring to the table. I appreciate you so very much. And for those of you listening in, we would love to see you over at Wealthy Speaker School. If that's not the right fit for you, hop on a call with us anyway, and we'll see what we can do. Maybe it's private coaching, maybe it's something else. I have a little Focus 40 session that I offer people at a really reduced price that might be able to be a difference maker in your world. So today was our let's go all in and talk about what we do over here, Jen. And thank you for being here with us. I'm really glad to have you. And for those of you listening in, thanks for being here, and we'll see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. If you need help building the speaking business of your dreams, head over to wealthyspeakerschool.com and take advantage of our 20-minute next step call. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast.